Welcome, everyone, to the people side of AI, cultivating human talent during digital transformation. While we're waiting for everyone to come into the webinar, please put in the chat where you're watching the webinar from today. We'd love to know. We know we have people signed up from all over the world, and we'd love to know exactly where you are. So thanks for that. All right. Still have people joining, so please put where you're coming from. Oh, we have someone from Munich, Germany. Oregon City, Pennsylvania, Spain, Finland. Wow. Canada, Calgary. Fabulous. Fabulous. Well, today we're here to talk about AI. And as we know, AI is transforming the way people work with technology as well as with each other. And you may find it's even reshaping your teams. As we begin to integrate AI at the organizational level, while still figuring out really what AI is, our ability to manage through the uncertainty will be key. Both people teams and people managers will face challenges at several levels, organizational and individual. During our time together today, we'll focus on the building blocks for successfully cultivating the culture, skills, and trust needed to keep your businesses moving forward. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Beth Banks-Cohn, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. Just a little bit about me before we introduce our panelists. For the last 20 years, I've been the founder and president of Audra Change Architects, a firm dedicated to supporting companies as they focus on the people side of change. I have a master's degree in adult education, one in organization development, and a PhD in human and organizational systems from the Fielding University. I'm also a certified Colby consultant. I'm honored to be a coach for Bravely, where I am privileged to bring coaching to all levels of individuals in organizations around the world. And now let's meet our panelists. Katerina Arsova is the head of people and talent at Leapsome, a flexible HRIS performance management and employee engagement software with the vision of one platform, endless possibilities. Kate leads the core HR function, including talent acquisition, people operations, workplace experience, and partnerships. Kate brings more than a decade of experience in HR and people leadership roles across different industries and sizes of companies, from small startups and scale-ups to big corporations. Based in Leapsome's Berlin office, Kate joined the company to champion Leapsome's growth across EMEA and North America. In her current role, Kate is focused on developing and driving innovative people and talent strategies that foster a people-centric approach, support business objectives, and drive a high-performing culture. Kate holds a master's degree in HR management and entrepreneurship and a certificate in executive leadership. Welcome, Kate. Monica Leone is the founder of Nurturing Choicefuleness, a company dedicated to supporting organizations that want to thrive in complexity and uncertainty. Monica's specialty is in complex systems, strategic thinking, and innovative work practices. Monica is also a coach for Bravely, where she incorporates practices that expand the mindset capacity of individuals and organizations in having greater choice and outcome-focused flexibility. Monica holds a Master of Science in OD from Pepperdine University, an MBA from the University of Antwerp, and is a certified senior and global professional in human resources, and holds an ACC designation from the International Coaching Federation. Welcome, Kate and Monica. Before we dive into today's topic, we'd like to get your thoughts on the challenges AI is bringing to you and your organization. Eric is launching a poll, and it will ask, what is your biggest personal challenge in dealing with AI in your current role? Please weigh in. Wow, everybody's very focused on what their challenge is, so that's great. Encourage you to answer the poll. If you haven't put in the chat where you're from, that's good too. Please remember to use the chat for any comments that you have. And of course, put your questions in the Q&A so that at the end, we'll be able to answer them. Oh, hello, Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Yes, I know there's more than one. We're asking you to pick the best, the one that's the most, right? I could have checked all of them. Denver, Florida, Germany. Have like a fan club, Kate. A lot of people from Berlin are dialing in today. Portugal. Okay. Don't forget. Oh, somebody from my neck of the woods, New York City. Very good. Okay. I think we've slowed down, Eric. Okay. Up, the poll is ended. Sorry, missed that. Okay, so 40% of you are your biggest challenge is staying current with rapidly evolving AI capabilities. And then 25% of you are really understanding the technology well enough to make informed decisions. And then 16% balancing efficiency gains against human workforce impacts, 10% developing fair policies for AI augmented versus traditional work, and 9% managing employee anxiety and resistance. So you are in the right place today, no matter what you chose, because we're going to be talking about all of these topics. So, okay. Okay, so let's get started with the questions. So, Kate, let's start with you. Let's start at a more general level. When it comes to the people side of AI, what might we see in organizations in 2025? And yes, we're already halfway through 2025, so maybe even going into 2026. And what trends in AI should organizations be paying attention to this year?
Thank you, Beth, for the question and also for having me here today. Pleasure to be here. I think 2025 is shaping up to be a year of intense transformation and strategic recalibration for lots of organizations, predominantly because of AI, yes, but I think also because of major economic and political changes we're seeing and are impacting the market and the industry. Just to name a few, return to the office, budget cuts, reskilling, the workforce in the face of AI are very much some of the hot topics today. We actually launched our Leapsome 2025 HR Insights report. For all of you who are not familiar or haven't read it, I'm sure our team will be happy to follow up with it after the session. But in short, this really shines a light on some of the major shifts we're seeing, especially in relation to AI. I think the biggest one is the sheer pace of AI integration. Our research shows that over 70% of leaders and organizations indicate that their organizations are struggling and restructuring significantly to integrate AI. It's not just a theoretical future anymore. I think it's very much the reality. It's happening now, and it's reshaping everything from individual roles to team structures and organizational workflows and processes. We're all seeing a surge of layoffs across major tech companies in efforts to realign the workforce and the operations with the evolving AI technology. I mean, just as a recent example, Microsoft laid a significant portion of its global workforce to kind of facilitate that shift or that change. Or in other cases, we're seeing companies taking a different approach where rather redeploying or reskilling their talent and their workforce. The second trend that stands out is the human element amidst all of those changes. Majority of the HR leaders report that employee resistance is actually the number one blocker to AI adoption. And a lot of that comes from a place of fear, anxiety, losing your job, or automating yourself out of it in a way, which highlights that successful AI integration isn't just about technology, it's deeply about the culture, the communication, and how you build trust within your organization. The reality is most of us will have a job that's very different from what we're doing today. And it's crucial that organizations and employees quickly adapt to those changes and to the new reality or risk falling behind. And lastly, the major shift we're seeing is the reskilling of the workforce in the face of AI. Majority of organizations report urgent need to upskill their teams, and failing to do so results in falling behind competition, falling behind product market fit, and leading ultimately to higher costs, productivity loss, talent loss, and missed opportunities. So I would say overall, the people side of AI, it's not just a hot topic of discussion, but it's also the core of a successful digital transformation.
Thank you, Kate. And Monica, that brings me to something that you've been talking about and writing about. There are so many unknowns when it comes to AI. So there are some concrete things, the upskilling, but even understanding what the future about AI is going to be. There are a lot of unknowns with that. How can people be choiceful when they don't know the outcome?
That's a great question, Beth, that humans have been struggling for a long, long time, not just about AI, but about any new thing that comes out there. So one of the things that we had before was that the pace of whatever change was, we could graduate it. We could actually say we're going slow, we're going fast. But nowadays, with this hyper activity that is happening, our anxiety goes up. We don't know how that future may look like. So when we talk about being choiceful, we mean that how can we actually ensure that we actually can make choices and we are not pushed or driven into a particular direction by the circumstances. So when it comes down to uncertainty, which is the driver, or it feels like, it creates all this fear, it's important to know that even when we go out there and, pull out of our garages or going in public transport, we just don't know what's going to happen. We have a level of certainty about it, but we're not 100% sure of what's going to happen. And so we are looking around and trying to gauge what our next moves are. And that's a skill that hasn't been developed in the workplace because we routinely thought that we could manage everything, and therefore that consciousness is there. And that's one of the skills that people are lacking the most because we haven't really developed it. The thing is that with any implementation, just like what we had, when computers went out there, laptops went out there, we didn't really forecast what were the unintended consequences. So at the moment, we're talking about what's happening in front of us and trying to mediate that. But we seldom take a time to reflect and think, okay, what are the unintended consequences of that? So the choicefulness here is to actually understand and keep looking what is happening in our own workplaces, because once we implement AI, the way that we interact with each other, the way that we interact with AI, the way that we define words like trust will change, the way that we define being effective or efficient will change, productivity will change. So based on that, in each of our contexts, those definitions will change. And that's the skill that we need to be looking at from an HR perspective, especially from a strategic point of view. One of the things that, something may be very easy, like, for example, I will put AI coaches out there because I will make my people feel better. But at the end of the day, we may end up created around what is called conferring personhood. That is that instead of people, we becoming a global place where people communicate with each other, we start not communicating at all. And we're already doing that when we gave our children devices to distract them while we worked. I did that myself. So one of the things that this new age actually is calling us to do is to think about this at many levels. So not just at the level of implementation, but at different levels. And that is the challenge of the HR professional or anybody that is leading people, is how do I manage whatever is happening from a strategic point of view, from a tactical point of view, from an operational point of view, and also manage the consequences of what we are actually bringing to, to our workplaces. And so
Yeah.
choicefulness, it's about, giving yourself a chance to actually decide rather than be pushed to or driven to something.
And do you feel that that's a skill, Monica? Choicefulness?
It is a mindset, it's a perspective. So it's not something that I just can pick up, but it has to actually, it's a perspective that has to be implemented somewhere. It's not something that I went to a class and I did that, but you actually have to practice in your own field, in your own company, in your own department, with the people that you work with. So it's integrate or apply theory, I will say.
Oh, okay. Okay. And someone put a comment in that around speed, around moving too fast can lead to unintended consequences. And how does that relate to choicefulness?
Well, what you can learn to do is if you move too fast, you are not able, it's like, driving and you have a town in between two towns and somebody says, oh, we just passed the town, did we? I wasn't looking. And so a lot of what people will need to do is actually slow down. But the slow down doesn't mean that you're dragging your feet. It's the way that you make decisions is going to be in cycles of what, so what, now what, so what, now what. And some of these cycles will be very small, and some of the cycles will be very slow, very, very slow, and some very, very fast that will only take you 5 seconds. But what you're asking is not just what happened here, but what is that I was intending to do with this? And so it's that intentionality about it. And sometimes the change is not necessarily because we thought about it. Change is already happening. So if you already have AI in your workplace, already you can go and see what's happening in the workplace, because that's what we call silent change. It's silent, but it's always happening. So even you and I, as we're speaking, change is happening. I've been using AI now for a little while, and I am now noticing what are the skills that I need to develop. So I need to develop more nuance. I need to develop more critical thinking. I need to develop different ways to communicate with others, because then I could absorb all that, and think that that's the whole truth. And we're at the moment having a lot of difficulties around what truth is and what is not. We have a workforce that we have sort of indoctrinated to follow the rules. So whose rules are they going to follow? If I have leaders that do not like to delegate, how is that going to work? So there are many, many things that are set up for us not to necessarily make the most out of the technology, but actually to create a lot of headaches moving forward.
Okay, that's so you've mentioned a lot of different things: nuance, critical thinking, communication with others. And Kate, I'm wondering if there are other skills that you have found in your work with your organization and other organizations that are really needed to successfully engage with AI.
Yeah, absolutely. And slightly connecting to the question Michelle had on kind of like being aware of what are the implications, what are the risks, what are some of the privacy or confidentiality concerns. I think the ethical implications of AI, considering those and putting it in an AI policy, is pretty much the first step organizations should be taking and looking into on top of your overall AI strategy, and making sure your workforce is not just familiar and aware of those, but you're continuously training them on the upcoming changes within the evolving technology. Second, I think overall AI fluency, so very much being aware not just of what's the tech landscape out there, what are some of the tools and the resources that can help me automate my job, do it better, do it faster, do it more efficient, and how you can combine them in an overall tech setup that ultimately helps you and adds value to your day. It's also being in general aware of what are the capabilities, how does AI work, and how you can effectively communicate with it. So pretty much like looking into prompt engineering and being aware of how you can get the input that you're looking for, and it's at the highest quality you can get. Combined with that, I think data literacy and interpretation can be quite important. I mean, AI can generate insane amounts of data and insights in literally seconds, but employees at the end of the day need to be able to understand, interpret, and apply that data in their day-to-day. And then lastly, I think this is something that people already have, but with the rise of AI will become even more important to kind of like keep on skilling that up. Monica slightly mentioned this as well, like the critical thinking, the problem complex solving, and how you can pair that with AI to kind of like reap the benefits, but also be able to add the human touch to it in terms of validating what AI gives you, identifying any biases AI might have, and how you can solve either complex problems or sensitive, whether it's customer interactions, whether it's employee relations that AI can't necessarily handle.
Yeah, great points, both of you. And I think as both of you have been talking, I've been thinking about this whole idea of the human side of it, right? That there's a human interpretation that comes up. There's a human interpretation around biases, right? You can recognize those biases. AI might not be able to. So to be able to really not just as I tell my husband when he puts something in Google Maps, don't just follow the directions blindly. Like think about it. Does it make sense, right? And I think in some ways that's a very simple example, but I think in some ways that's really important is to not sort of leave your brain at the door, but more really use your brain in ways that you all are already doing with each other, but use it to integrate with the data that comes out and the directions that come out. So I can definitely understand that. I could definitely see that.
Beth, I would just like to add one
Yes,
more thing,
absolutely.
which is basically creativity. So that's one thing that we may actually lose if we do not integrate it in the workplace.
Yes, and from a skilling perspective, how do you skill for creativity? Like how do you train for creativity?
I think one of the important things with creativity is that I can do 100 training sessions on creativity, but the key of it is that to let me practice. And so I understand in some industries, you have to do particular jobs in a consistent way. So there may not be that many opportunities to be creative. But in some others, what we can do is can foster that, and that will not be an AI thing. In fact, I think one of the things is going to happen, which is counterintuitive at this moment, is that we will have to have more times that we are together as people to actually start thinking about this in a very different way. Because if everybody's using AI, just think about it, right? It's almost the same sources. We're all going to be delivering the same cars, right? We're all going to be doing the same things. So creativity will actually be fostered in a very different way. You will have to be probably more out in nature or do things in a slightly different way. Think about your products in a different way. But it's going to be more experiential. And that's something that at work, in workplaces, we tend not to do because we think it's like, what does that have to do with anything? So even the way that we think about training will be changing in the future.
Yeah, really interesting. And we got a really interesting comment that's related to this whole idea of skills, that this person has been seeing articles about students not being able to write papers without AI, and they're very concerned about what that means for the workplace and future employees, along with losing creativity and personal growth. So I'm curious, Kate or Monica, if you have thoughts about that.
I think a lot of that comes from A, expectations and how you set that up, whether it's in a student environment, whether it's in a workplace environment. I mean, very typical challenge nowadays is hiring and how much candidates are leveraging AI to craft their CVs, craft their cover letters, tackle case study challenges, and pretty much answer interview questions. And I think the approach we're taking here is sometimes off track, in the sense we're trying to prevent them leveraging the technology while it's in the organizational interest that this person can leverage AI and can use it in their day-to-day day. So I would rather shift the approach and potentially tailor the whole interview process towards candidates as a challenge, having a real case scenario where you can see how they apply creative thinking, how they apply problem solving, while using AI at the same time to kind of tackle some of those challenges. And I think in those instances is when you get to see that creativity sparking, and you can pretty much assess it. And in a similar way, you can craft L&D training programs that kind of keep that at the core of what you're trying to do while still leveraging the technology.
Monica?
Yeah, I just want to say that one of the things that may prevent what may be coming if it's left unattended is to actually build more reflection in the programs and more working together in the trainings or developments that you do. So the reflecting on by oneself is helpful, but it doesn't develop metacognition. So if I'm with other people that may think or see something different, I am actually provoked to create more nuance in my appreciation of things. So one of the things with AI is that it doesn't really develop nuance. It develops knowledge gathering. And, otherwise we will be talking to people that know a lot of things, but don't know what to do with that, right? So we need those practice fields. It's like in order to ride a bike, I can read the manual, but, the manual is not going to help me get on the bike. And our life experiences are beyond work, and they are also very integrated to work. So as workplaces, then we need to start thinking about what are we also, not just in terms of product, in terms of customers, but what's the kind of society that we are actually trying to create together? Because almost 60% of the whole population in the world is employed by someone. So there's an important contribution out there. So how do we start thinking about it in terms of actually creating these experiences of learning, not just trainings? And that's a big challenge when we think about what we're doing out there in the world.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because I know we've been talking a little bit about, actually quite a bit about some of the positive consequences, but also some of the negative consequences for implementing AI in the workplace. And I'm curious for Monica, I want to start with you. Is what do you see in the work that you do in organizations? What's a great unintended consequence that's really positive, and what's an unintended consequence that's negative that you're also seeing?
I think one of the positive things with AI is that actually you can automate all those things that you don't like to do much. It just creates more space to do something. The problem is that we haven't really thought about what else would we be doing. And so at the moment, the layoffs and everything is a response to actually not knowing what we are going to do with that resource, right? What is going to happen to all those people? Where do they go? Like if you're in tech, it really doesn't matter, because if you come from a big company, some of the other companies that are in the second, third tier will take you on, but that will not happen in all other kinds of roles, like if you're in manufacturing or something like that. I think that's a positive thing. So it's knowledge, is the availability of a staff, is the fact that you could do things quicker. The downside of it is that we just don't know what are all those things that are going to be popping up. We are just finding out how, even though we are more linked together, or connected with each other, we actually have different types of conversations, and conversations that are not deep. We are not communicating with each other at all in ways that are meaningful. So there is always a downside. And so I think that's the biggest lesson. We don't know what's going to happen. And what people are going to fear is, what do I do with that? I just hate AI from now on? Or, there's a lot of stuff saying, if you're over a particular age, you're basically being generationally stuck in a place because you don't know the technology. So it's something that organizations will need to be looking out for and doing something about it.
Okay, thank you. And Kate, what about you? Do you see a specific positive or negative consequence different than what Monica's seeing?
I think very similar. Like on the positive side, the automation piece, the freeing up space for something that drives bigger impact or actually fulfills you and challenges you more or leverages your strategic, creative thinking rather than the repetitive, monotonous task. I think the downside of that is if you look at a typical employee day, you usually have, yes, complex problems to solve, challenges, etc. But I think part of from the repetition or the monotonous aspect sometimes comes from a place of relief, so to say. And I think with AI kind of removing that part completely, there's going to be a huge burden of continuous 24/7 focus on complex problem solving, which sometimes can be quite burdensome to people. I think burnout might be a topic that we're looking into. And then similar to what Monica said, the ways we collaborate, the way we work with each other, the way we learn even is completely and drastically going to shift and change. We talk about AI agents, having digital colleagues, working in virtual reality or augmented reality working environments. I think a lot of that will fundamentally shift the way we build relationships and the way we interact with each other as humans.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm wondering, Monica, because we've talked about this a few times and touched on it, is this whole idea about what you said about I don't- I I might decide I'm just not going to like anything about AI. So how have you seen companies deal with the resistance or the fear that comes with AI in an effective way?
Um, so I think the first thing to take note is that we usually see resistance as something bad. People are resisting to something, but just imagine that you have a favorite spot in your dining table. That's where you sit all the time. And somebody comes and says, you can't sit there anymore. In fact, there's no table, there are no chairs. You just have to stand up and eat. So you had something there. It was a need, and that's gone. So if we start thinking about resistance as a characteristic of change, it just happens because some needs will not be met, or those whatever you can offer will change that for that person or for that group. It's going to be important to actually understand how the routines are changed, not just what you're trying to do at a larger scale, because one of the things that we miss is actually when we do large scale change is we don't atomize and we don't think at those individual routines. And it's there where people are still going to be asking you, they will want more human touch. So for example, where I live at the moment in New Zealand, one of the companies actually, their competitive edge is basically all about human touch. So if you call, there will be a human replying to you. There will be a human doing the whole transaction. So I think that's something important to look at. But the resistance here will be around thinking about what are those points of friction and actually understanding what are they teaching you and how can you mobilize those. And they will not be big things. You don't need a project plan for that. You will need your leaders to actually, or any individual that actually really wants to support a more prosperous company, whatever it is that you're trying to do, to actually start noticing where those friction points and releasing that energy. So in many cases, you will not be able to solve the problem, but you will actually be able to manage the tensions around those issues. So that's a different way to look at this concept of resistance, so that we are not so, because sometimes our reaction, and this is where we're not choiceful, we tend to just have drastic measures, with people, and then what that just creates is more ripple effects, and therefore, you create more victims, or this victimhood type of mentality that doesn't really help you move forward, and move the rest of the people with you.
Yes, and this is something that in the work that I do with change in organizations as well, is really helping organizations figure out that why resistance is happening, right? Because there's different reasons. And also, I always tell them resistance that you know about is a gift. Like resistance you don't know about is not a gift, right? That's really a problem. But if somebody's resisting to your face, then that's a gift. And then it's your job to figure out why. Is it because there's a loss that they're going to lose something? Is it fear? Is it is it is it something that they just that they've done a lot of research on their own and they feel like it's not a good idea, right? So then being able to have those conversations and meeting that person where they are is really critical when you're thinking about resistance. And I know somebody posted that their boss is very resistant due to the large environmental impact, and she's banned AI at their organization. And I think that's really interesting, because I want to talk about leadership next, and that's a very interesting stand that a leader is taking in an organization. So I'm curious, Kate, have you come across companies or individuals that have talked about the environmental impact of AI?
We actually recently had a question in our all hands coming from the employees and concerns around exactly that, the environmental impact, the amount of energy AI is using, and how is the company kind of tackling or addressing that problem. So I think like considering all of those aspects and incorporating it into your strategy in a proactive rather than reactive manner matters a lot, and then giving that transparency and giving that clarity to people is going to be crucial.
Yes, and I think that really is a critical point, that it's really important to include it in your strategy. Have a strategy. That would be important, right? And include things like that in the strategy, because it is something that people are going to be thinking about. And there are lots of different facets, and we only have an hour to talk about things, but these conversations about AI could be and should be taking longer than just an hour conversation. And as Monica was talking about, really having people communicate and talk to each other, that becomes a critical component from a leadership perspective, in regards to that. And that brings me like to another aspect of this, which we've talked about all along, which is trust. There are so many opportunities to build trust, but also to lose trust when you're deciding to implement AI. So, Kate, I'm wondering what are some of the effective tactics that you've seen or that you've used to build trust during an AI-driven transformational a project?
Yeah, and very much a great question, Bud. And I think like paramount piece to incorporating AI into the workplace. I think as with every change management process, what really helps and what's really crucial is providing that transparency and clarity to the people on the why behind the change. Why AI? Why are we adopting it? What's the strategic purpose? How does it connect to the overall strategy, to the business objectives? Um, I think that helps employees understand the purpose and one, reduce suspicion, reduce fears, reduce anxiety. If you're not openly communicating about things, employees are gonna fill in the blanks themselves, and that's usually more so in a negative than positive light. So one, proactively address that and provide that clarity on why AI. Um, Two, I think it's very important that you address head on the concerns, the anxiety, the fear around AI, and communicate how is this impacting roles, how are those evolving, are certain functions or departments or teams disappearing, and if so, what's your strategy to combat and mitigate that? Are you repurposing your teams? Are you reskilling them? Are you running a layoff and like a complete restructure? You need to be transparent on those things. Three, I think the training and the learning piece, it's quite important. So providing a learning environment and providing equal opportunities for everybody to upskill and train on the new skills, on the new technologies that are rising, are very crucial. You can't just expect performance, or you can't just expect that people will adopt that and then thrive at it. You also need to provide the resources and the training for them to actually excel at it. And then we've talked about, I think somebody had the question of the leadership stand, right? I think when running such important organizational changes, leading by example is crucial. And the way leaders behave, the kind of curiosity they show up, the willingness to learn and implement that, and also change themselves, I think talks volumes, and sets a good standard and example for the rest of the company. And I think finally, reiterating on the human aspect and the human oversight, and putting that at the cornerstone of your programs, your strategy, your policy. Like, AI is not there to purely replace us or automate every single job that's out there. I think in a lot of ways, AI will drive a positive change in the workplace. It's a matter of how you actually use it and how you leverage it to your own benefit.
Yes, absolutely. And I think leaders sometimes underestimate the amount of trust that's built when they're transparent, when they let people know that they've actually been thinking about it and considered different things, and this is what they've landed on. Like, helping people understand your thought process as a leader is, in my opinion, really underestimated as what it does to help your workforce get in line to implement what you're wanting to implement, because it is often overlooked. It is often overlooked. So I agree with everything that you said, but I that one definitely, from my experience in organizations, that one's really really critical. Um, Monica, do you have any other thoughts other than what Kate talked about?
I would just like to add that we need to be thinking about the implementation of AI, or how we're going to use it, maybe before even implementing it. Maybe some of the reasons that we want to use it, and where can we use it. So there are two things that I would like to bring up. One is the concept of change enablement, which is prior to change management, which is, like doing the thing. It's actually is thinking about what does my soil or my context requires for us to transition to whatever in a very different way. So that's one. And the second one is to be more nuanced around the approach to AI. Do I need AI everywhere? So somebody put in the chat, do we need those for, some kind of entry level roles or whatever that is? And an example was when we had that automated type of registering when you come into a company, that you don't need a receptionist, right? But in some places, they've actually gone back and having a receptionist because they just want a warm welcome rather than you just putting your name and who you're going to see. So that's a choice, right? Another thing that is an example, and the last one is around a policy that was given, for example, in India, where Uber, for example, doesn't exist, because they know that a lot of people there locally become taxi drivers. So when we're thinking about the adoption of AI, how we're going to adopt it, how extended it's going to be in terms of our adoption, we need to be thinking not just about what somebody in the competitive business is doing, but actually about what are those characteristics that are going to distinguish our business. What are we trying to create, not just with our people, but also within, the counties, the states, the regions that we're working in. So I think the way that HR or people leaders can actually intervene in the business is actually bringing us, we have repeatedly said here, is the human side of the human side perspective to this very, very important issue, Beth and Kate.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, and I think that that's been a theme from both of you is that the human side of this is going to be the critical success factor for successfully implementing AI and utilizing it in your organization to help your organization move forward. Um, so I think that that's really important. I have a few more questions in the time that we have left, and then we're going to go for Q&A. Kate, I'm wondering if there's something specific that human resources leaders can do to be the best strategic partner when with the business when they're implementing AI.
Absolutely. I think ultimately AI isn't just about a technological shift happening on the market, it's a major human shift as well. We already talked about how AI is completely changing the ways we collaborate, we experience work, we exchange, we learn. I think the entire workplace, as such, the industry and the human interactions and dynamics are changing. And HR is uniquely positioned to lead that transformation. I think the role of HR leaders isn't just about managing the change, but also actively shaping a future where AI, one, empowers the workforce, two, drives innovation, and three, elevates the human experience at at work.
Okay. And Monica, what do you think?
I couldn't agree more than what Kay has said around that human side. But I also know that behind the human side there is the number side of the question. So that's what I said. This is not a. I don't see this as a problem that needs to be solved. It's complex because it's it varies from place to place. But I think it's very, very important that people start mapping the tensions in the business. So from the business perspective, if you're working in the business, a lot of this comes down to dollars and cents, and sometimes the human side gets left out. But even through that lens, there can be made a human a case where humans are taken into account, and actually you can see that the bottom line can actually, you can deliver the same things but in a very different way. So it's just how do you create these choicefulness things for you to happen, right? And one of them, as I said, is managing the tensions. So not thinking that the finances and people are two polars, but there's a tension that need to be managed. And under that will be, different bits on your business. So it's a very different way to really think about making choices. That doesn't mean that you are managing these polarities and one of them has to win or lose. So that would be my I don't know, my penny contribution to this conversation.
Yes, and I love what you said about that implementing AI is not a problem to be solved. And I think that has a lot to do with mindset. Like if we think of it as a problem to be solved, we may be looking at it differently than if we think about it as another business opportunity and doing what we need to do in order to integrate it in a way that moves our business forward, which is what you're saying about like mapping the tensions and understanding the nuances and those kinds of things. So I think that I think both of you have given really important points. So I appreciate that. So we have a couple questions, and I wanted to go back before we do our like concluding comments. I wanted to go back. There was a question put in the chat about how this would affect entry level jobs, and I know Monica, you spoke to it a little bit. Um, but the person is asking, how would it affect entrance level jobs that usually take on those repetitive, simpler tasks? These establish a starting point to learning the processes of the company. So how would AI, if you're automating those simpler tasks, how would AI affect the role that entrance level jobs take on? Does it change the job? Either of you. can answer. Kate?
I think in a way it's also a great opportunity for younger generations. I mean, they're quite tech savvy. They're very much up to speed with the latest digital technological advancements. They're super eager and willing to adopt technology, b, use it, and three, try to optimize and innovate. And I think doubling down on this aspect and this core piece of skill set and curiosity younger generations bring will in a way transform the way they experience work and the way their roles are crafted within the company. And two, I think yes, a lot of the automation piece comes from understanding and knowing the processes, which would probably come from a more senior person within the organization that's already familiar with the workflows, with how things operate. But I think the smaller pieces to that could be breaking that down to simpler processes and then putting a training program for younger people to get to know them step by step and kind of figure out the automation piece around them as well.
Yeah, interesting. Monica, what do you think? Are entry-level jobs going away?
I think they will be different. They don't necessarily will go away. They will be different if we are willing to create different things. So at the moment, most of the conversation, I see some of the stuff on the chat, is about replacing and getting rid of it. I think this is where our imagination needs to kick off. Let's imagine that you get rid of all the entry-level jobs. Right. So that basically gets you, depending on the country that you're in, you have your 16 to 24-year-old population. You know, they go to those jobs where they are studying, where they are working. Now, we don't have those jobs anymore. What are those people going to be doing? I'm just saying that, you know, we really need to start thinking not just about how this is going to be cost effective. Kay has already mentioned that even the mundane tasks in a routine, they have a place in how they give us a moment of rest, of break in our processing. Now, we all think that we are solving complex problems, but we certainly haven't been able to tackle the biggest issues like, you know, even just dealing with the topic of climate change or any of those things. So we really, really need to be thinking in a very different way, just not about replacing. So that's a thing to be curious about and inquire. So if I remove those jobs, what else am I going to be creating? How else can these people contribute, you know? That I don't have an answer, so I'm putting the question out there. I'm sure that there's 100 and something brilliant people out there that can be thinking about what then is what is our contribution to society if we continue to just do take out, and so this is part of what is called thinking with our left brain, which is basically all about abstraction and repetition and not integrating in the wider repercussions and consequences of the decisions that we make.
Yes, absolutely. And somebody put in the chat that entry-level jobs will evolve. And we need to think about also that if you want to get to a more senior job, you have to start somewhere. So you can't just come in. Like there's not going to be like this pool of senior people that's unending. At some point, people are going to age out. And so we always need to have younger, less experienced people coming into our workplace that will then become senior people at some point. And so we need to be thinking about that. Okay, we have a few more questions. The first question is, if companies don't prioritize using AI due to leadership decisions, for example, how will they stay competitive in the marketplace when it's likely that the majority of those around them will be using the technology to have a competitive advantage? Anybody can
I
answer.
think maybe the simple answer is they won't. The reality is AI is here and it's here to stay. And oftentimes it's also what gives you that competitive edge, not just the pure usage of technology, but also how do you pair it with the human capabilities and talent you have internally. And if you're not good at doing that, I think very soon you will fall behind.
I
Yes.
think in order to navigate that, maybe have um, a thoughtful process about where do you want to introduce it and the reasons that may sit behind that. I think that probably when we think about AI adoption, it's people are thinking again around polars, do I adopt it or I don't? And what about if we just adopt particular things that are of use to our businesses? So it's more of a gradual and nuanced perspective. I think the word nuance it's a very important word in our vocabulary moving forward because we don't want just to do whole thing, but maybe in the places. And even though I may want AI, my company may not necessarily have enough resources to do it at the moment. So where do we implement it? Just be very careful because this happened a lot with the outsourcing in the beginning of the 2000s where everything was sent somewhere else. And then, 5 years later, everything was brought back to the original country. So it's a nuance and a pace. I think for me, the solution of the opportunities that AI can bring to your business need to be considered.
Okay. So we've had a lot of conversation today. And so Kate and Monica, what's the one takeaway you want participants to leave with today?
I think I would highlight that AI isn't our enemy. I truly believe that in many ways it will transform and improve the world we know today for the better. I know oftentimes it's scary, it's unknown, and in many ways it feels like it's taking away our jobs. I think if anything, more jobs would open. Yes, some of those, especially the manual repetitive stuff, would be completely taken over AI. But I also think the highly skilled jobs, the ones that leverage unique human capabilities, will evolve and transform to something different than what we have today. And I love what Monica talked about the change enablement piece and the aspect of choicefulness. I think two crucial aspects for every organization to think about and try to intentionally and thoughtfully strategize before integrating AI or kind of moving away with anything.
Okay, thank you. Monica.
I would just like to, for me, just be curious and keep looking and just thinking together with others to see what's happening or what you can do from whatever space you're in. So formulas, I think, will not be helpful in this new age, or as helpful as they were before.
And for me, I want to make sure that everybody has the codes that you need from SHRM and from HRCI. And I just want to end with I think the one thing I want people to walk away with is there's a lot of moving parts, and to dive into those moving parts as opposed to shrinking away because you're intimidated by them. Just don't be intimidated. There's lots to know and lots to do, but it's one step at a time. So here are your codes, and thank you so much, Kate and Monica. This has certainly been an interesting conversation filled with solutions, but also much food for thought. So I really want to thank both of you for bringing your energy and your expertise to the people side of AI, cultivating human talent during digital transformation today. And thank you, everybody that joined us live. We really appreciated all of your input and all of your questions. And we wish you the best of luck as you move forward on your AI journey.
Thanks for having us, Pat. And thanks everybody for the great questions and conversations.
Thank you.
Thanks.